Welcome. It's great to have you here, and we look forward to you joining us throughout the Wellbeing Conversation, which is also a collection of stories, a lot of stories. Our aim to share stories from experts, from well-known individuals, from ANZ people, to present unique, inspiring and practical insights to help you navigate through this challenging period. It is great to be here, and it's wonderful again to welcome our recurring panellist, ANZ Ambassador, Dylan Alcott. Dylan.
G'day, Brad. Great to be here, mate. I've got to say, I absolutely loved episode 1. I thought it was going to be tough to top, but we have 3 cracking people coming up on today's episode. So make sure you stick around. You and I were easily the worst to perform in the first episode, and I think you and I will be the worst to perform again.
Okay, thanks for instilling that confidence in us. But we'll get there. Now, we've got a lot to talk about today because we're talking about flexible working and the new normal. We've got 3 special guests today. First of all, we welcome ANZ Group Executive Technology, Jared Florian. Jared, great to have you with us.
Hey, Brad. Thank you very much. Great to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
As are we. Also joining us today, feedback expert, and author. We'll talk about the book, Flawsome, in a moment. Georgia Murch. G'day, Georgia.
G'day, Brad. It's nice to see you again, darling. Thanks for having me.
You know this is going to be a great chat when somebody refers to you as darling. So I'm certainly...
darling, love, chick.
Well, extending those very friendly and easygoing personalities. Also joining us is Dominic, Dom Price, work futurist at Atlassian. G'day, Dom.
How you doing? Looking forward to this. I appreciate the fact that Georgia can give a hug using words. When she says the word darling, it's like someone just giving you a little tight squeeze. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I agree. This is going to be a lot of fun. And as I mentioned, we've got a lot to get through. So let's get into it. We are going to start off with, I've never done this before, a quote from Dr. Zeus. And Jared, I read this in a piece that you posted on Blue Notes recently. Just enlighten us about that quote.
Sure, Brad. So, the quote pretty simply is that bad things are going to happen. It's a fact of life. And when bad things happen, we've got one of 3 choices. We can let it destroy us, we can let it define us, or we can use it to make us stronger. And certainly as we went into this period, I'd say back in February, I found this quote particularly useful for me from a leadership point of view and for my team as we thought about what are we going to do? How are we going to respond? How are we going to act?
So early days there, Jared, which of the 3 do you think it is? Because it's been peaks and troughs.
Well, certainly it's obviously a very terrible time. There's a lot of very, very bad things happening across the globe. We don't for 1 minute want to miss that. But at the same time, it is a chance to get stronger. You know, I started talking to my team early on about this gift and people thought I was a little bit weird, but it was a gift to say, what are we going to do? We've got a chance to step up and do some things differently. And as a result of that, I think through March, April, May, we set about doing a whole range of things, which we can go into a bit later. But I think it is about a headspace to say, these things, they're sent to try us, they happen. Goodness knows we don't want them to happen. But now that they have, what we do next counts the most. So for us, it's all about making us stronger.
And Georgia, what's the feedback you're getting from people? Are they working their way through this? Are they being positive and coming up with strategies to cope?
I agree with Jared in that I think the universe is asking something of us now, whether we're aware of it or not. And many people forced into change. And I see working with teams and leadership teams at the moment, the ones that are making the most of it are choosing the mindset shift, which is what Jared's talking about, which is, what if this is happening for us, not to us? Mm. And it just throws you out of victim space and throws you into learning opportunities. And it's those organisations, those individuals that actually can thrive, that can do really well in these times. But at the moment, it's a head game. Once you get this right, everything else comes along.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dom, I mean, you guys are always looking for different ways to do things. What's been the impact at Atlassian you've seen?
It's funny, in so many regards, there was no impact because, like one of the examples, 3 years ago, we acquired Trello. They had a rule set: if one person dialed into a call, everyone dialed in. So even if 5 of you were in the office, we always dialed in separately. So it saves you having to empathize. You just have a level playing field. And so we've been doing that forever anyway. So none of our meetings changed. I'm like, oh, it's just the same. I'm just working from home. And now you're imposing, in my lounge and on my life. I think from that regard, what we realized was the technology's been available for flexible working for a long time. The mindset hasn't. And when I say mindset, let's call it what it is, it's trust, right? For many senior leaders, they've had this view that line of sight equals productivity equals people working, right? And so they hoarded people around desks, not because they thought it was optimal, because they didn't trust their people to not work anywhere else. And so I think that's the honest conversation we're having. And the danger here is, because this to some extent has happened to us, I've had the fortune or misfortune of dealing with the whole of the city leaders outside Atlassian who are like, here's the change we're driving now. And I'm like, I'm not sure you can pat yourself on the back for a pandemic. I'm not sure you can pat yourself on the back that you've delivered on these things, because they did happen to you. It's a forcing function. And so I think we need a rebalance of reflection of saying, why didn't we do it earlier? Because the technology was there. What are the human-to-human practices that we need to put into place to actually make this work? And how do we make sure we take everyone along? Because whilst people say the great thing about COVID is we're all in the same boat, we're all in very different boats. I know some people that are struggling a huge amount, and I consider myself very fortunate. I live by myself. This isn't even my apartment. I've just walked into a neighbor's place. But I have the comfort of dialing in from anywhere and doing my job, and I feel extremely privileged doing that. But I know so many people that aren't. And so I think, I like to say never let a crisis go to waste, but in doing that, I think we need to double click and go, who are the people we might accidentally leave behind? And how do we make sure we don't? Because this, equality right now isn't there in this environment for me.
Yeah, well said, Dom. I think from my point of view, especially in terms of the importance of a positive mindset, it's definitely been something that I've had to, personally practice my whole life. It's quite funny when you are born with a disability like I was. I guess on paper, I have a really tough life, and a lot of people might feel sorry for me. It's always funny when my dad or my mum says, oh, I've got to go watch my son in the Paralympics. What do you think the first thing people say is? They say, oh, I'm sorry, what happened? Not, oh my God, he's going to the Paralympic Games. And I think the importance of a positive perception, especially at times like this, has never been more evident, because people might, look at me and say, he can't get up steps, he might live a tough life. I live a better life than anybody that I've ever met. I'm easily the luckiest person to be doing what I'm doing. And I guess there was a stage in my life where it could have gone either way. I could have felt sorry for myself and looked at my brother and said, hey, I can't kick a footy like him. I won't be able to, go to the beach and run on the sand. But I guess it's really important for me in my life to look at all the things that I can do rather than things that I can't. And I think in the current pandemic, and I'm not trying to deny that it's so tough for all of us. It really is, and especially for people's mental health and things like that. But there are definitely silver linings and positive aspects of this. And as you said then, Dom, the increase in flexible working space has been so critical to helping people, not only striving for the economy to grow, but also maybe shining a light on some things that we didn't really think about. I know as somebody with a disability, we've been crying out for flexible working forever. And so many people I know in my community have always said, look, I can get in the office for 3 days, but for 1 or 2 days, I need to work from home because of my extra care needs, because I can't get in there, because I don't have a carer. And employers previously have been like, that means you might not get the job because we can't see you doing work. How long has people had a bit of a sniffle and they've forced themselves to go to work when they haven't been productive, as opposed to being trusted from working from home and contributing to that organization? So, obviously there are so many negative things going on, but I think hopefully, as it continues, because unfortunately it's probably not going away anytime soon, that shift in our mindset to finding out ways that this can benefit all of us and our organizations is so important, and even having conversations like this.
Jared, can I ask, at one stage there, I think ANZ had about 95% of your workforce working remotely. Through what you've seen over the past few months, how has it been?
So I think a couple of comments that the team have made already. It's been a very different experience for lots of people. 95% of our workforce from India to New Zealand. So you've got to think that through as well. It's not just different states in Australia. The experience in New Zealand has obviously been quite different to people in Manila, for example, or our team in Bengaluru, or even Chengdu, who were our front line, the first people to experience this back in January. So the difference, positives, negatives, we've learned a lot. I keep coming back to, I don't think that there are a lot of brand new trends through it, but I think it's accelerated a whole bunch of things that were coming at us anyway. Whether that's around sort of the flexible work agreements, sorts of things that Dylan mentioned earlier, or even just the sheer focus within corporates around the importance of wellbeing, the importance of awareness, the roles that leaders play. All of that just is getting amplified, and we're finding that in this short period of time, if I just use a really simple example, the role of leaders to make meetings more engaging. Think about how do we do that differently? Doing it remotely, you've got to go through a whole different process and mix it up a bit and have a little bit of fun. And it's not just about the team drinks on Friday. People are doing that. But it's, we, for example, Monday mornings, it's a mood day Monday. We check in and see how people are feeling, either what's happened well, what are they grateful for, or maybe what are they looking forward to this week. Little things that we're trying to ask our leaders to think about to make a difference.
Georgia, how are the relationships happening now remotely? Because as Jared touched on, we still need to connect, we still need to communicate, we still need to give feedback, we still need to work. It's same, but it's different.
It is really different. And whilst there's so many opportunities in terms of remote workforces and flexibility, what we're really lacking now is we're lacking physical connection. And that's actually part of how we're wired as humans. I miss hugs. Like I seriously miss them. And people actually just miss the energy of being with each other. And there's conversations about introverts and extroverts, but we're actually wired to be with each other. And some of the things that are coming up in conversations that I'm having and programs that I'm doing is that I'm seeing a lot of leaders actually question themselves and question whether, so Dom's nodding, and questioning whether they can play this empathy role and can play the role of actually, I don't know that I know how to check in with people, and I don't know how to show that I care. And I think that's a really cool conversation for people to be having with each other with themselves without shame. Like, it's okay if you actually love doing the technical stuff more than you love doing the people stuff. It's okay if you don't feel comfortable doing those components. But what I feel like we need to give ourselves permission to do at the moment more is actually just hold space to be exactly where we're at. And yes, the mood meetings and all those sort of things, but we don't have to solve stuff. And we're in such a workforce at the moment where, it's like I can hear my mum and dad, don't come to me with a problem, come to me with a solution. And, I'm calling BS on that, because I just think we need to actually create time to be with each other. But what we really need to do is actually just know where each other is at. And I last week was in Struggle Town. Like, I was really in Struggle Town. My dad passed away 12 days ago, and while he was sick, he actually just dropped dead really suddenly, and it was really traumatic for all of us. And I felt like, and this was my first, going back into doing client work, and I was really shaky. And I just thought, actually, Georgie, you need to practice what you preach. So I just started with, this is where I'm at. And I got upset and I was shaking, and I just thought, I'm not going to do this pretense of pretending that everything's okay anymore, because I'm in Melbourne. I can't even grieve with people. Like, it's stuffed up. Like, and what that then facilitated with is, one, I had some breathing space because I could actually be real and human and not pretend that I'm not okay. And then it started this conversation where we threw people into, chats to talk about where they were really at. And the feedback at the end of that was the best bit. Not learning around how I problem solve better or what I do. The best bit was where everybody went, yeah, I'm a little bit stuffed too, or I'm a little bit struggling too.
Georgia, I couldn't agree anymore. And the vulnerability in that is really relatable as well. And I've always been pretty stoic in the person that I am. And I've actually been struggling as well. There you go. And I think as soon as I started saying that out of my mouth, that, my career was cancelled and my life was turned upside down, just like everybody, God, I felt better. and being able to talk about it. And it's an important lesson from, as you said, from top tier leaders all the way down. You don't, just because you are a captain of a team, a CEO, a director, whatever it is, doesn't mean you can't be vulnerable. And I think when people are, especially the teams that work with you, can relate a lot better to you, and they feel, I guess, create a safe space where they can talk about where they're at as well. And as we're talking about today, this isn't just like a flash in the pan. This is the new normal for potentially a long time. So to develop those skills, I think is so important.
Dom, Atlassian has been, had a lot of people working remotely for a long time. I was watching an interview you did, and I was fascinated when you revealed your third biggest office. So you guys, in a way, have been prepared to a degree for what we're experiencing?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things as to like why that's the case. First of all, I think there's a conversation about remote versus distributed. So one of the things that Gerard touched on, ANZ has locations all over the world. So the fact that you're in an ANZ office, you're still distributed. You have to find different ways of connecting, right? And travel isn't the answer to all of that. And so we've been finding ways of working as distributed teams around the world since we were born, right? We've always been spread around the world. What we then realized, kind of to Dylan's point, like you actually exclude a huge amount of the workforce, potential workforce, when you say 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, that desk. And the reality is we kind of sat there and we're like, there's no reason why that construct needs to exist. We're not running a production line. There is no correlation between your time at the desk and the genius you create. So why are we trying to force that? And suddenly over time, we start to experience it. We honestly thought a few years ago we were really good. And then when we acquired Trello, we had that humble moment of going, oh, we're not actually really good. We're actually quite mediocre. And the great thing was that even though Atlassian was big and Trello was small, we have this rule that whenever we acquire a company, we're like, what can we learn from you? We don't want you to become us, we want to learn from you. And so Trello was over 70% distributed and remote at the time. And so we learned a huge amount about their practices, their norms. But it's funny because whilst it gives you that access to the talent, you have to find the human to human ways of working to build the inclusivity. Otherwise, you draw people in and then you push them straight out again, right? It's similar to back when I started work, early on in my career, and everything felt like a boys' club. You could talk about diversity, but for every woman that you hired, one left the door because it wasn't a great place to work. So we talk about diversity is the invite to the party, inclusion's the permission to dance. And so what we've been doing is we've been practicing that remote work is saying, hey, what works, what doesn't, what works, what doesn't, what works, what doesn't. And the hard thing for leaders is saying when you first try remote work or remote leadership, you're going to be crap at it. You're an amazing leader, you've got 25 years experience, but when you first try and build this new muscle, you'll be crap at it, accept that and get comfortable with it. And that's the hard thing right now is as we're coming out of crisis, we've got a whole lot of people, we've mentioned vulnerability, we've mentioned empathy. They can say those words so easily, but damn, they are crap at it because it's not a natural skill for a lot of people. Vulnerability, very easy to say, very hard to do. For a lot of people, they talk about empathy. What I see is sympathy, right? Dylan's example. We're going to see our son at the Paralympics. Oh, I feel for you. What happened? You're like, no, empathize with me. It's a celebration of his success, you bloody idiot, right? Mm-hmm. And we confuse those two pathies, right? Empathy and sympathy. And actually, as leaders, it's not just about being vulnerable and managing a distributed workforce. It's about doing it authentically and real. And so many leaders, unfortunately, walk around with invisible capes on, and they think they need to be superheroes. And that's going to kill any ability we have to build the future together, because we'll be so hell-bent on being superheroes, we'll just copy, cut, and paste the past. And that's something we can't do. We have to have that right level of introspection and reflection and realize that the future's not built. It's not determined. It's not written. We get to build it every day with our action or inaction. And inaction is as powerful as action sometimes.
With that, just quickly picking up on that point, if I could, the irony is that my own experiences in the last little while, there are things that I've been doing in the last 3 months, felt really, really uncomfortable. They feel really different. And I'm definitely crap at it. But it is about trying. It's the age-old thing of if I can actually build a muscle through practice, I'm going to practice on stage. I'm going to practice on the paddock. I'm going to practice on court. There's no point practicing on my own. So practicing in front of other people, with your teams, other groups, some things work well. Also finding other people who are good at it and saying, well, hey, like the way you did that. Either can you come and help me, or can I take a little bit of that and apply it? Because I certainly hear what you're saying, Georgia, as far as we need to create space to have the conversations. I think also try to provide an appropriate injection of ideas of things to try is also part of it. Not to fix it, but to give them things to think about maybe is part of what we've got to try and do as leaders.
It just reminds me, one of the organisations that I have loved watching grow is Vinamofo. And one of the things that I love about them is that the owners would celebrate the things that didn't work. They were just like, actually, we made this decision or we made this hire. It was wrong for these reasons. I made the wrong call. What I've learnt from this is X. And it increases risk and gives people mission to fail. But in actual fact, failure is not the problem anymore. It's the learning from it that's actually the cool thing. And if you fail without learning, now you're the problem. So it's recognizing what you're talking about, Jared, is, let's just make mistakes together. I think if we don't keep learning from it, we actually, we keep people holding back from either poor decisions or mistakes that they've made, which accelerates problems down the track.
Can I tap into 4 really wise people here, and speaking on behalf of other people that are like me, I'm talking to you, Tom, other people that are like me that really struggle in isolation, how do we combat that? What do we do?
I think one thing that really struck me, and I know it really hurt the community that I'm from, is even the term social distancing. So we were told to be separated from each other in terms of 1.5 meters apart. But what that actually means in definition is socially, people were removed from connecting with each other as well. The term physical distancing is obviously a lot better because we don't want to be physically connected in terms of how close we are, but socially, we 100% have to stay connected. And I know during the first lockdown, especially for people, there are people that are most vulnerable in our communities, people that are immunocompromised, things like that have been in isolation since February and will continue to be in isolation for a very long period to come. And without that, as you said, that even that social connection, right, it makes it so tough for so many people. And I think it's so important that more so than ever, it's always important to do this, but more so than ever at the moment, to connect with people in whatever forms that you can. As simple as a text message, a phone call, a conversation like this. It's so important to chat to people because even by us 4 doing this right now, I feel better. But in saying that, I think it's okay to be sometimes as well. And it's okay to feel down and it's okay to talk about that. I remember when it first came around, I was being a bit stoic and my beautiful partner Chantel's like, "Are you all right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine. You know what I mean?" But, I actually had to talk about it. You know what I mean? And I had to be like, you know what? I'm supposed to be at Wimbledon today and it sucks that I'm not there. And as soon as I said things like that, I felt better.
There's probably a whole conversation there about the male use of the phrase "I'm fine," meaning the exact opposite. Because if there's one thing we should solve in the world right now, it's like, "No, I'm fine." And you're like, "Okay, you're clearly not."
And I find that, and I've been a mental health advocate for a long time, but if I can sense something and maybe I can see a difference in somebody's behaviour, I'll say to them, "How are you going? Really? How are you? Really?" And even if they say fine, I follow up and go, "Really? Are you really?" And every single time they'll say, "Thanks. I really appreciate you asking."
But there's a thread there that you pulled on and Dylan pulled on, which is like know thyself, right? I think, I've always been an advocate of thriving, right? Of living the best life. And actually I've changed my bar in the last few months to surviving. I'm like, we're in crisis mode. Like thriving's a nice to have right now. The reality is survival, right? Because the world has changed and all the foundations of that world have changed. And therefore in survival, I have to know myself and go, what are the things that are essential to my survival, right? Apparently, personality surveys tell me that I'm an extrovert. So I get my energy from people, right? Go figure. And so I'm like, cool, how do I either substitute or replicate that in this new world? Because there's nothing to be gained by me whinging about it. So how can I go and find substitutes or alternatives? And then how can I embrace those even if I don't like them? So we did an exercise as an exec team the other week, and I thought it was going to be absolutely rubbish. It was Pinot and Picasso. So we got delivered wine, we got easels, canvases and paints, and 20 execs with partners and children and aunties and uncles and all sorts dialed in, and we did a painting class together. And I thought it was going to be cringeworthy. And 2.5 hours later, my stomach hurt from laughter, because I can tell you with all certainty there is no correlation between IQ and artistic ability. We were awful at it.
100%.
But the banter, the competitiveness, when we showed each other the pictures, and people were like, oh, did you draw something different? And it was just a great reminder that for 2 hours we could just be human together and just laugh, and it was okay. And that's nothing to do with productivity, kind of not anything to do specifically with wellness. It's just, let's hang together and let's just do an activity.
So I've seen this come up a couple of times in conversations like this. People who apparently, according to the tests, are in the extrovert category. So I'll be the voice for the other half, and sort of the little bit of wisdom for the group who actually like to disappear and go and sit on a mountain. Now is not the time to do that, particularly if you're leading a group, obviously. And that's hard, right? Because you can sort of actually feel quite comfortable. And we joke a little bit in my team. There's a few of us who sit there and say, hey, this is awesome. No, actually, it's not awesome. And how do I make sure that I'm aware of my own energy levels and the energy of the rest of the people in the virtual room? I think to Dom's point, that's a question I used to ask, I guess, pre-COVID, and I still try and find myself asking today as I start each day, and where's my levels at, and what are the sessions I've got coming up? What's the energy of the other people in the room, so that we do check in and ask how you're going and take genuine interest. Yes, we care. Some people manifest that differently.
Jared, I know in the article that I referenced earlier, you pointed out that wellbeing, this is not something now to be driven by HR, people and culture. This is to be driven by all leaders, everyone.
It is. And I think that whole idea of this was something that was coming at us anyway. If you go back to last year, the year before, mindfulness, awareness, all of those movements be getting, I guess, more support and genuine support, not just sort of lip service. And then this happens, and immediately it just goes on steroids. So I think, to me, that's the point here, is to say, from a leadership point of view, what is it that we do to build these skills in ourselves, regardless of the tech? Forget the tech. I was on a session the other day which was supposed to be all about tech, and ended up all being about culture and people, because that's what it is. How are we going? Yes, we can use these tools as little hacks to help us, but how are we going to help support our teams through what is clearly going to be an extended period that has challenge? And somewhere in there is opportunity. To George's point, the universe is throwing whatever it's throwing at us, and it'd be a shame to miss that opportunity in amongst all of the other challenges we've got. And as leaders, awareness, mindfulness, creating a space, meditation. If you use an app, if you read a book, whatever it is, everyone's going to find their way. But I think it just comes down to some very basic principles, they're not new in human history, but we've probably lost our way a little bit over the last little while, and this has been a bit of a reset.
I have a firm view that, like 50, 60 years ago in business, if a leader said they were going to go for a run, everyone would be like, what are you running from? And then gyms became normal. And I have the hope that mental health becomes the same kind of first-class citizen. I think we're in a weird time, though, where we've poured accelerant on it through COVID. It doesn't necessarily mean we've got any better at it. And so I think we need sort of, like Georgia says, space. Gerald, you talk about forgiveness. Like, how do we create this moment where we're like, it's okay that you're not great at this yet? And the examples I've seen, I was on a call with an organization the other week. The senior leader did an amazing talk about we're people first, we care about you and your families, and do this and take time out, and we're going to give you extra holidays, all this stuff. And I was like, it was heartwarming. And then the last moment snatched defeat from the jaws of victory by saying, but don't forget to hit all your key 4 goals. And I was like, no, you were doing so well for 7 minutes, and then you ruined it. And so we're still finding this balance of how do we follow through on that. And that wasn't like that. Thankfully, that leader wasn't punished. It was a great teachable moment to go, how can we deliver that message and keep the people message center and not distract with, you're allowed some time out as long as you've done everything else first.
We shouldn't underestimate the accelerant piece. I read a little quote the other day, and these things stick in my head anyway. When someone's drowning, it's a bad time to give them a swimming lesson. Yeah. So right now, we're just going to be also mindful of everything else that's going on and finding sensible ways to inject, but not overwhelming.
Yes.
Dom, you touched on people there before. I love your response when people say that your Atlassian is in the tech business.
Yeah, we're a people business. Like all of our IP, our innovation, our creativity, our curiosity, it's all people. We happen to choose technology as the vehicle to deploy that both internally and then what we share with our customers. But actually, and Gerard's a great example of this, where our customers have come back and told us stories. They don't say, oh, I used this feature and did this thing. They're like, here's how it helped evolve our culture or how our people work, or it helped us achieve an outcome. We just happen to have chosen technology as a vehicle. So the people centricity for us has always been front and center, and I think helps us not only build a great culture and values over time, but scale those things effectively. Because we've had epic growth both geographically and in terms of numbers in that time. So it's very easy to lose that spirit if you're not careful.
Can I ask everyone a phrase that I think we're probably all a little tired of, but it's part of the world that we're in?
Don't say pivot.
No, I'm not going to say pivot. It's almost on the banned list. But new normal, okay? New normal. I know, but it is. It's something that we didn't consider previously. But my question to all of you is, what is the new normal? Really? I mean, you're a futurist, Dom. What is it? I don't know.
So it's funny because every day is a new normal, right? Like I've been a futurist for years, and the thing I laugh about is people ask me for predictions, and I'm like, no. I'm not going to predict. What I'm going to ask you to do is to take an action and measure yourself on the outcome, the impact that you have, right? That's you get to create your own future every single day when you wake up, right? And so the reality is that if you look at change over the last 5, 10, 15, however long period of time you look at, businesses have been building a new normal every single day. The most relevant businesses today, you look at Netflix as an example, bears very little resemblance to the original version of itself, right? They've evolved every single day. And so we've been doing this. What's happened right now is we've taken a hold of traditional businesses and said, ooh, lots of things about your business model doesn't work. And they're like, oh, we need to build a new normal or the next normal. And it's like, well, actually, maybe you don't, because I'm going to promise you're not going to be able to predict it. So how about you just evolve a little bit every day? And that evolution will enable you to stay relevant. So I think the superpowers of great businesses right now is the ability to adapt, the ability to have high learning velocity, which Georgia talked about before. How do you take an insight and turn it into action? And the ability to be nimble, right? If you can do those 3 things, you stay relevant. And actually the idea, a senior leader said to me, we need to build an 18-month plan for our new normal. And I'm like, I don't think you get it. Because 3 months ago, COVID didn't exist. So an 18-month plan is already a waste of time. There's no way of getting that right. So how do you break it down to more manageable chunks and actually reward and recognize progress over perfection?
Yeah, well said, Dom. I tell you the one thing that I am finding abnormal that is affecting the new normal for me is not being able to hug my mum. I know we've talked about it on this call, but that lack of connection with the people that you love, especially in a physical sense, I think that's why things like words and actions are going to be so important to create that connection that we don't normally have. And I think that's going to be a tough thing for people to deal with for a long period of time. And it's okay to accept that and try and find other ways around it to do that. But I think it's so important that people, unfortunately, stick to the rules and keep doing that. Otherwise, this will drag on longer than it should. But also, if we don't, it'll affect people that are vulnerable in our community in the worst possible way.
Yeah,
So well said, Dylan. I actually think the pursuit of trying to find what's normal is something that's crippling us. Because one, it's something you can't define because there's no such thing. I never want to be normal, ever. So let that go on the record. But also, if we're pursuing, we've got to define it. And then if we don't get there, it creates disappointment. And we're never going to get there anyway, because there's going to be a whole different amount of perspectives around what that looks like. And so all the energy created into trying to create a vision of a future or something that you think looks relatively okay to accept is actually the wrong amount of energy. I think surrendering to what we're in right now and how we make the best of it, business-wise, personal-wise, is actually a much better process and journey to establish. And that's where we do get the Kaizen effects, which is what you're talking about, Dom, which is, okay, what could be better? So what's one more thing that we can do to have a better day tomorrow, either personally or professionally or as an organisation? That's a much better distribution of energy than trying to define something that's actually nearly impossible.
Absolutely. Jared, moving forward, I imagine, like so many organisations, ANZ has maybe pondered over doing things differently for a long time. All of a sudden you do them differently because you have to. You get thrown into the deep end. Some things work, which Dom touched on. You give it a go. If it doesn't work, you move on. Other things don't work, but it's about just trying different things because we're in an environment where we just have to adapt, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, we all talk about this idea of failing fast. We don't necessarily practice it. So again, I think it comes back to this thing of being really honest with yourselves. We are trying some things. They're going to work. Some things may work brilliantly for one group, but not for another group as well. So it's not just about the thing. It's about the context of that particular team, where they're at, their skills, their current position. So I think it's just, again, we keep coming back to this thing of awareness and really being connected to your team, knowing where they're at, talking to them, and then trying things together and celebrating the things that work well and talking pretty publicly about the things that don't go so well and what do I learn from it? Back to George's point, if I learn something, then that's great. I picked up, always make new mistakes. It's another little adage to try and throw out there.
Everyone, thank you very much. We are going to pause for a moment because shortly we're about to wrap things up. Or are we? Thank you everyone for joining us today. It's been terrific. Jared, I know that you've got to go, and I just want to put this out there to the others, is I think we have unfinished business. There's so much more to discuss, and we're enjoying having a good old banter, chinwag, storytelling session. To the others, would you be okay if we kept going? And let's turn this chapter into 2 chapters. What do you think?
I'm in.
Sounds good.
Well, I'm really jealous that I can't stay. It's been a fantastic conversation, and I think to one of the comments earlier, I got a ton out of it just by sitting and listening. So I'm looking forward to hearing what part 2 is, even if I can't be in it. And really, really, really do appreciate the conversation with the team. So well done, guys, and we'll speak soon. Stay well, everyone. Take care.
Thanks very much, Jared. Really appreciate your input. Dylan, Georgia, and Dom. We'll be back in a moment with part B. Thank you for watching. This is the Wellbeing Conversation.
Hey everyone, Dylan Alcott again. Now, we touched on a few topics around mental health throughout that chat. Now, if that brought up anything for you, make sure you reach out to beyondblue.org.au, or their phone number is 1300 22 4636. You can also hit up Lifeline on 13 11 14, or reach out to the people within your ANZ teams and they'll be able to help. And here's a little taste on what's coming up on the next episode of the Wellbeing Conversation.
I've seen a lot of people struggle with their identity.
Am I the only person that has no purpose? Am I the only person that is feeling this? Am I the only person that isn't sure about what's going to happen next?
And I think right now, with the changes we're going through, if we can't find a way of unlearning the old habits and rituals, we'll never have the time to learn the new ones.
The only room that he can get peace at the moment is actually in the bathroom, and he was a bit embarrassed. I'm like, no, we just got to be real.
Because as soon as I did that and I stopped sooking about not being able to go to the Paralympics, I immediately felt better.
We don't own people as assets. They're not resources. We borrow them from their family for 8 hours a day, and our job is to return them in a better state than we took them in.
Welcome, it's great to have you with us, and we look forward to you joining us throughout the Wellbeing Conversation, which is also a collection of stories, a lot of stories. Our aim to share stories from experts, well-known individuals and ANZ people, and it's all about presenting unique, inspiring and practical insights to help you navigate through this challenging period. Now, this is part B of our chapter, conversation around flexible working and the new normal. So let's reintroduce our panellists. Recurring panellist Dylan Alcott. Dill, let's keep going. This has been fun.
Let's keep going, brother. I'm loving it. Learning a lot myself.
Georgia Murch, great to have you with us. Well, we're just continuing the conversation. There's a lot more to get through.
There will be, certainly with Dom and I on the call.
And Dom Price from Atlassian. You're good company, Dom. Can I say that?
Oh, you can. I tell you what, I'm ready to spice this up.
All right, well, let's get ready to spice it up. Here we go. Now, we didn't include this tidbit of information in the first chapter of this particular theme, being flexible working and the new normal. We thought we'd save it for the second chapter. Dom, you have, well, it's not so much a revelation, but is it true that a couple of TV shows played a role in you ending up on our shores?
Yeah, it was 2003. I was busy working and drinking my way through London. I had the opportunity to travel and work in Australia, and I was inspired by Home and Away and Neighbours. I was convinced that I'd either be living in Summer Bay or I could just walk into neighbours' houses and share tea. And sadly, police and HR have had to be involved in my time in Australia. Those TV shows are not true. They are not documentaries. They're soap operas.
Hey, Dom, do you want to know that I was actually on Neighbours?
Really?
That episode?
I'm pretty
Yeah.
jealous.
Dylan trumps you.
Do you know Chris Hemsworth, brother Liam Hemsworth? He was on Neighbours, and he was a surfer, and he had a surfing accident and ended up in a wheelchair, and he wanted to win the girl over, so he challenged the girl's boyfriend to a match of wheelchair basketball. So I was his like mentor coach on the show. So that pretty much makes me a Hemsworth brother, doesn't it?
Mate, I tell you what, you might be missing Wimbledon, but you've got other stuff to be celebrating. You are all right.
I'll take that.
Wow. You guys are so famous. I feel like it's really important to share that I was a Heinz baby.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah.
Mic drop moment from Georgia.
Yeah, beat us all. Brad, what about you? You been on TV?
A while back. We've had a fantastic first part of our conversation around flexibility and the new normal. Dom, you've had many instances of really valuable people within Atlassian whose circumstances changed, and it meant that they moved either to the edge of the city or to the other side of the world. But with some smart thinking and adapting, you make it work.
Yeah, it doesn't happen by accident. I think there's a phase where you can be lucky with it and you feel like it's just natural, and it's not. As we've talked before, there's so many social aspects and so much osmosis to being in the same co-working space with each other. And so you have to be very purposeful with how do you build and maintain relationships, how do you build connections, but also realize that so much of our work can be done asynchronous. So much of our work, our tasks can be done without other people. But it's when we come together as teams that we want to be purposeful about how we collaborate. And we believe that we can do that online a huge amount, but where we can't, where we have that complex, gnarly problem or something we've never done before, we're quite happy pre-COVID to put people on a plane and get them in the room together so that they can have that rich tapestry of conversation. But that's the exception, right? What it means is that in their normal day-to-day business, they can design their own week and get the flexibility that Dylan talks about. You know, if you have someone that needs care or access to something at a different time, the construct of 9 to 5, Monday to Friday precludes them from work, and that's not cool, right? They've got an amazing brain and amazing heart. Why are we excluding them from this rich sort of idea of collaboration and respectful dissent and diversity of thoughts? We need those people in that conversation. So we've enabled ourselves to do that. We were doing it in a kind of drip feed way, by selection, challenging people to think about how it worked for them. And then we just poured a huge amount of accelerant on that in February when COVID happened, right? And it just became, we went from kind of whatever percent, our third biggest office, to our only office is now work from home.
Yeah, wow, that really is amazing. To everyone here, because we are sharing bits and pieces of ourselves, has anyone found out something that has really surprised them in regards to who they thought they were?
I think the biggest thing that I've learned throughout this is, I guess, the ability to find the positives in the situation that we're in. And I was somebody that was constantly busy. I had about 7 jobs on the go and I was never home and things like that. And by being forced to be home and being able to see my partner a lot more and connect, with my family, even though not directly in contact, I just can't even begin to tell you how much I've loved that. You know what I mean? And it was something that I probably wouldn't have done previously. I would have just kept going at 100 miles an hour. And by able to take a step back and actually, calm down a little bit, I've actually enjoyed my life probably a bit more than I thought I would have, which has been a great learning from my point of view. And the other thing is just how much of a benefit it can be, as Dom said, to be able to, work from home and to be able to set your own schedule. I know from my community, obviously me having a disability, there are 4.5 million Australians with a disability, huge number, 1 in 5 people. only 53% of them can find a job. Unemployment is double for people with disability compared to able-bodied people. Yet they're some of the smartest people you've ever met, equally as productive. All they need is a bit of understanding around the best ways for them to operate. And our workplaces and our organisations should be a snapshot of our community, shouldn't they not? Because our clients are everybody. They're everybody, all kinds of different people. Yet for so long, I think a huge majority of our population have been left out of the working pool because they haven't understood the ability of how to get these people involved. So hopefully I think these learnings can really inject, I guess, a different mindset into our organizations, but also promote diversity within there that can really help, I guess, our society as a whole.
I love what you're saying, Dylan, because it's also throwing a rock to people's perceptions of I can't. And in COVID, where we've all had to go remote, and Dom, you touched on this before, I can't let my workforce all go remote because I don't trust them, or whatever it may be, or we can't afford it, or we need people to be together in order to create a culture. And these were all the misnomers that we had around how we're supposed to do work and life moving forward. And one of the things that I've been surprised about, Brad, is the connection that can be created by not being together. So there is no substitute for physical connection, none at all, but there isn't. It is powerful, it is amazing, but what I have been surprised about is the level of intimacy that can be created when we are remote from each other. And it isn't because of the technology is not the problem, it's how we use it, or it's how our mindset uses it. And so I think about, in our team too, so when it first happened, we had an office, we don't go to it anymore, but we checked in with each other far more regularly, but far deeper and faster. And if anything, we've seen an increase in productivity because people feel more seen and heard. So they actually want to contribute more to the organisation. And when I'm working with other organisations and they've made a commitment to actually be more connected in their just in terms of knowing each other and seeing each other, their productivity has also risen exponentially, and they don't quite understand it because it's this kind of esoteric, soft skill kind of thing that they go, well, how do you put a price on it? But people are all feeling much more proud of being with each other and working for organisations that actually value them as a human, not the work that they do. So that's really what I'm quite surprised about. I didn't think it could be so powerful.
It's an interesting one. On reflection, I probably define myself by my two purposes in life before. So one of my purposes was work, right? I have this role, this persona, there's stages, there's presentations, there's audiences, and that was very much a core part of my life. But the other purpose that I've had for the last few years, for the last 6 years, with my older sister had been diagnosed with cancer. And so I would do regular trips back to the UK because I had a role to play as a brother and an uncle. And so those were the two things that drove my purpose. And within 2 months, both of them disappeared because there's no stages, there's no flights, there's no events, and my sister passed away. And I'm like, I've been driven by these two purposes that I never articulated. They're not on a piece of paper. It's nothing to do with productivity. It's just they were the two things that drove me. And you're like, well, hang on, now they're gone. What is my purpose? How do I go about finding that? How long do I give myself to find that? And how okay am I with not having a clear purpose? Because it's such an intrinsic motivator for me that defines so much of what I naturally do on a daily basis, whether it be the work I do or the conversations I'd have with my sister. And you're like, cool. Well, now I've not got those. So now what happens? Like, where's that foundation? And so I've been going through a process of trying to work out, how do I redefine what I stand for? What is my identity? What is my role in society, family, and work? And how do I use this opportunity to rebuild that? Because when two major foundations go away, there's no point plastering the wall, right? There's no point trying to decorate. You've got to go back to basics, right? And find your core values. And that's been a fascinating challenge for me in the last few months. And actually, I'm really glad that it's a weird side effect of COVID that I've had so much time to think about it. Whether it be flying back from the UK and doing 14 days in quarantine, or actually when I finish work here in a given day, I can sit on my balcony, have a cuppa and just watch the sunset. That's my time to reflect and go, what am I going to do next? and what is the impact of what I have? Whereas I think a lot of people were in autopilot. It's a new year, it's a new week, it's a new month, and we were in this copy, cut and paste. Those incidents for me have made me just go, stop, like it's time to, this is a blank piece of paper, it's time to start again. And I think it's an interesting way to think about what we stand for and the impact we want to have.
Great advice, Dom. Love it.
And to all of you, and for Georgia and Dom to open up about your own personal losses, to be able to share that with everyone, I think it's just a really lovely and poignant reminder that, you know, we all grieve, and there are people that are watching this that are going through harrowing experiences, and it's not easy. So I think just the fact that we're able to share I use the term stuff, and I don't know what stuff is, but I think it's great just to take off, not the mask, not this mask that we have to wear, but just to be who we are. It's just so much easier.
The facade. Yeah, you've got to drop the facade. And I think that's what this time will reward is you know, when Georgie says we have ways of connecting, and Dylan, you touched on this with family, right? It's like, yes, we might not be able to physically hug, but when you open up a bit of you inside and share with that authentic, vulnerable fashion, and it's like, it's not a pity party of who's got the worst backstory. It's just going, hey, here's some stuff, and it is stuff. Here's some stuff I've got going on, and here's some good stuff. Like, I feel really privileged in my life right now, and here's some bad stuff, and then net off, and I'm okay, right? I'm okay. But there's some pluses and minuses, and I think we've had a habit in the past of just talking about the pluses, and now's the time for us to go, actually, let's just balance the conversation, right? Because we are all rounded human beings with some terrible stuff that happened and some awesome stuff. And actually, I think finding the balance is where the beautiful conversation can happen.
I've seen a lot of people struggle with their identity in the last 5 months, a lot. And even in my network, which is, so I've got my own consulting business, you know, by early Feb, hundreds of us, and I know those people, all had their calendars cancelled. So, you know, years ahead, we've just got no work. And that's a whole conversation in itself, but there was a lot of the similarities that I saw was with people not just struggling with the financials, but who am I if I'm not delivering? Who am I if I'm not, you know, doing a keynote? Who am I if I'm not running a team? Who am I? And I actually think this is one of the things that COVID is our gift for, if we want to try and find a lesson, which is when you strip away the gold medals, when you strip away being amazing in front of people, when you strip away having a director in your title, or, you know, running a project or being on TV, who are you? And I think getting back to that purpose of who am I, how am I meant to show up for myself and others, is actually one of the beautiful gifts from this experience, because when we can create that interconnectedness, which is not a title, not a what I do, but how I be, I reckon that's when we start nailing how to do humanity and how to do life and how to do work and how to do teams, which is we connect through our vulnerability, not through our walls, not through our masks. And if we can't do it now, you know, like I'm having a meeting with a guy last week, and he's on the toilet. Like, he's literally not, the lid's down, but he's on the toilet because the only room that he can get peace at the moment is actually in the bathroom. And he was a bit embarrassed. I'm like, no, we just got to be real. And like, this is how we roll these days. And it's getting us on an even path. And it's whether we choose to bite that and actually really, you know, be real.
The one thing I challenge there, G, is we're doing a research study right now. And one of the things that came out is organizations aren't moving quickly enough to appreciate changes of identity. So this one lady told a story in our research project, and she said, I had 2 identities before. At nighttime and at weekends, I'm a mum. I'm a parent, I'm a wife, and I'm a mum, and I'm brilliant at it. And then I put on the superhero outfit in the morning, and I drive to this other place, and I'm professional, and I do all these other things. And she's like, and then since February, I've been crap at both of them. She's like, I feel like a terrible parent and a terrible professional. So I'll be in the middle of a meeting, and one of the kids will do something, and I can't finish the meeting. I have to go and deal with the kids. And then I'll be dealing with the kids, and then I'll need to do something work. And I'm like, Mummy, you're here. Why aren't you playing with us? Right? And she's like, so her identity, the blurring of those lines for her whilst for a lot of people that talk about flexibility and yeah, I can build my own week and all the good stuff, she's like, I've lost my identity and I feel really mediocre at both things. And so I think there's an onus on leadership and organizations to say, how can we help you navigate through that? Because people who lose their identity, lose their motivation, their sense of self-worth, right? And that's a whole sort of myriad of other health problems. Sorry, Dylan, I cut you off.
Oh, no, I was just going to say how powerful it is to hear two extremely successful people talk about that. You know what I mean? That you're going through it as well. I think so many people think that obviously they see when they turn on the news and everything like that, that everybody's going through this. But when you really drill down to it, people think internally, am I the only person that has no purpose? Am I the only person that is feeling this? Am I the only person that isn't sure about what's going to happen next? And if you take, strip back, as you said, all our titles and everything that we do, it comes down to the person that you are and what you believe in and what you want to do. And everybody's feeling that. And it's a conversation everybody has to have with themselves. You know what I mean? And I guess get permission to have that conversation, because it's super powerful. And hopefully things like this helps. You know what I mean? I know it's helping me just listening, and it will permeate through more people. And I guess also for people that don't see things like this, pass that message on. You know what I mean? Talk about your experience. Talk about how you're feeling and the path that you went, because that'll help other people feel like they can do it too.
On that, I mean, how are you going with your purpose and identity? Because for so many of us, tennis is where we see you. And temporarily, it's been taken away from you in that competitive aspect. That's a big life change.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I have known this for a while, but it was great to put pen to paper that people think my purpose is winning Grand Slams and gold medals. But I could win 25 Grand Slams and 10 gold medals, and it actually isn't my purpose why I get out of bed every day. My purpose is to try and help people that are just like me, people from my community with a disability, help them get out and live the lives that they want to live, help them get out and be the people that they deserve to be and get the opportunities that they deserve. I've always known that's my purpose, but to actually put it out there and realize that's what my purpose was really powerful for me. And although that's why I like winning tennis tournaments, because it gives me the platform to do what I'm passionate about, which is try and break down barriers and change perceptions and eliminate stigmas for people that are like me. And so in saying that, my purpose was taken away from me a bit because I didn't have that stage to do keynotes. I wasn't in the media. I didn't get that opportunity to go with Wimbledon where I could do a great speech and talk about what was important to me. And that affected me. It really did. But it was all about finding other ways to contribute and other ways to do things that were important to me. And in order to do that, I did some work online through some support worker websites, one in particular called Mabel, where I went online undercover and talked to people with a disability via conversations like this, how they were handling their lives and things like that. And it was probably one of the most rewarding things I did through this period, because I actually learned more off them than they learned off me, to be honest, mate. I really did. The way that they were handling their current situation and things like this. And it's, listening to Georgia and Dom, it's so pivotal to remind yourself of what your purpose is. Because as soon as I did that and I stopped sooking about not being able to go to the Paralympics, I immediately felt better, because I remembered what my true purpose was in being here. And as soon as I started being me again and not worried about, hitting tennis balls, but more so worried about what I really enjoyed doing every single day with my life, mate, it changed my mindset straight away.
Fabulous. Fabulous.
Can I just check? For you, Dylan. Here's a big hug.
Yeah, fabulous. Can I just go back to when you were doing that counselling? So it was incognito, was it? They didn't know it was you?
Yeah, they didn't know they were going to speak to me. So I didn't want them to be like, oh my God, I'm talking to Dylan Alcott. If they knew who I was, it was just like, literally, they said, oh, we've got a support worker who wants to check in. And they said, no worries. And then they opened the call and it was me. It was awesome. I played battleships with one girl online. She kicked my ass. God, I was bad at that. I talked to a guy who he has autism and he wanted to get into podcasting. So we talked about that. It was so cool. And it was just like, you know what? That's what I'm here to do. I'm here to talk to people who are like me, who might hate themselves because of their disability like I did, who might not be given the opportunities. And I understand I'm in a privileged position. I'm the most lucky person that I've ever met. I love my life so much. And people with a disability might see me on TV and be like, oh yeah, but I can't be like that guy. But if you take away the fact that I'm lucky enough to be a Paralympian and work on TV, I'm just someone with a disability who used to also hate who I was. And I just want to try in even the smallest way to help them be proud of who they are. Because, you know, as soon as I was proud of who I was, my life changed immediately. And it's silver linings, you know, the pandemic sucks. I'm not going to say it doesn't, but you find little things every day where you realize that was actually, you know, there is a silver lining in all this. And I'm just trying to see the positive aspects of those things.
It might be worth so there's a few things that Dylan teased out there. I was very fortunate a couple of years ago. A wonderful lady who mentors me. I was in New York visiting her, and she gave me an exercise. And I think it's an exercise we can give to all the listeners for free, right? To help them if they're struggling with purpose or identity, to help them do it. It's called the 4 L's. What do I love? What do I long for? What do I loathe? And what have I learnt? But you do it on yourself. I do it as a leader every quarter. I reflect back on the previous 90 days. What have I loved about myself? And I hate that bit. I'm like, oh, no. You're like, no, own it. It's probably your superpower. I'm not saying get on a soapbox and beat your chest. Just like own the thing that you love about yourself, right? Dylan's owned his thing. You're like, brilliant. What have you longed for, right? And you're not allowed to add in a longed for until you take out the loathed, because we're all full. Cognitive, we're all full. We have no space. So stop trying to add stuff in until you take something out. And then the learn is, what's the thing I experimented with last quarter? Whether it worked or not doesn't matter. What did I learn from it? And I go and tell as many people as possible, right? And then they tell me back that they're 4 L's. And once I first did this, I'm like, oh my God, I've just created peer-to-peer learning network free of charge, right? All it takes is for me to park my ego at the door, delete my rational brain and have an honest conversation with myself, which is normally takes the wine in the background to do. But I'm like, what do I love, long for, loathe and learn? I do the exercise. I share it with others. That's me being vulnerable because it's honest. They share back. And I think it was Dylan mentioned before, like finding the person who's good at something. When I longed for something and I would tell people like, oh, I'm really good at that. Can I help? I'm like, yes. I'm not going to learn it from a book. I want to learn that from a person. And so that exercise has helped me evolve every single day and every single week and every single quarter by making sure I delete the baggage that I'm carrying. And I think right now, with the changes we're going through, if we can't find a way of unlearning the old habits and rituals, we'll never have the time to learn the new ones.
A friend of all of ours gave me a book last year or the year before, The Mask of Masculinity by Lewis Howes. And one of the key takeaways and I know a lot of people this is their world now, is that know-it-all mask. I always felt like I had to have an answer for everything. So now I find one of the most empowering things is when somebody asks me something, I smile and I say, I don't know. I don't know. And I invite them to give me the answer, to pass on the knowledge, because I really want to know what they've got to say. And I'll acknowledge that for maybe the previous few decades, I was not good at that. But acknowledging that has just been a big step about that.
Yeah, I got a slap about the face on a similar theme a few years ago. I was in Austin for South by Southwest. Had the pleasure of meeting Dan Pink, who's a hero of mine. I'm sharing these challenges I've got because I want his wisdom and his advice. And he just stared me straight in the eyes. He's like, Dom, argue like you're right and listen like you're wrong. I'm like, yeah, but I'm like, oh, no, I think I argue like I'm right and I listen like I'm right. And he's like, yeah, that's the problem. Listen like you're wrong. And don't listen with the intent to correct or butt in or challenge. Just listen. Just take it in. And it was this realization that I did the reflection of meetings where I'm like, I would leave meetings going, that was an awesome meeting, because I didn't hear the thing that no one said. Right. And so I'm like, how can I listen like I'm wrong? And that was a muscle I've had to build over time. And it wasn't natural for me to build. I'm a very confident alpha extrovert. And so it was hard for me to do, but it's been very powerful. Like the value I've got from that, from genuinely listening like I'm wrong, has been huge. I don't learn by speaking. Right? I learn by the events I attend and the people I listen to Dylan, Gerard before, you, Brad, George. Like, I'm learning more from that than I am from here. Because my own thoughts, I knew them beforehand. It's very rare that I come out with a bit of genius where I'm like, wow, that's awesome, right? But it's listening, but it's just absorbing. It's not judging it. It's just taking it in and going, whether I liked it or not, it doesn't matter. I just need to take it in and let it sit there for a while.
people really struggle to be present and listen to what's going on because they have these I should stories all in their head all the time. Oh, I should have listened. I should have been like that. I should have made that better decision. I shouldn't have done. And what stops us from listening a lot of the time is the judgment that Dom's talking about. So it's the judgment of self or the judgment of others. And so until we actually learn to start dropping some of that, it's hard for us to truly listen.
Dom, I touched on it earlier. You don't have any issue being in an uncertain environment as long as, and you take it away.
As long as you build confidence over time, right? One of the things that Atlassian's taught me in the 7 years I've been there so far is there's so many things we don't know. And actually, the more we try and work them out, the slower we get. So it's like, okay, we've just got to accept there's unknowns out there. That creates inherent uncertainty, which a lot of leaders panic about. They're like, no, we need a plan. I need to know what day is that going to be delivered on. You're like, I honestly don't know. Like, it will get delivered on a day. I just can't tell you with certainty. What I can do, though, is if I start doing something, if I reflect on regular intervals, I will get more confidence as I deliver more milestones. I will learn more. I'll learn more about the scope, the customer I'm delivering it to, the nature of the thing that I'm trying to deliver. I get more confidence over time. And sometimes that confidence drops because I learned something. I'm like, oh, we're now further away. Like, we've spent another week, but the thing that we've learned is we're going in the wrong direction. But that's good. We only spent a week doing that. Now we're going to go in a different direction and I'm going to learn more. And so what we reward people for is navigating through that uncertainty and building confidence over time by saying, what's my mission this week? What have I learned? What's a good milestone? What can I reflect on? What can I do better next week? And we do that as a team because the diversity of the team view, the fact that everyone sees the world through a different lens, that gives us a valuable set of insights. Because this idea of perfection, it kills innovation, it kills curiosity, and it kills just a lot of people's mojo, right? Because it's such a high bar that you're never going to achieve that it's thankless. And so confidence for us over time gives us more agility and more nimbleness, which rewards our staff, right? It lets them use their brain and their heart to guide themselves, and it rewards our customers because it means our products will always be better.
Dom, you and the company, it's one of the most successful companies in Australia, and it's so refreshing to hear, yeah, we don't have all the answers. You know what I mean? So many people out there would look external, like 100%, they got the answers. It's got to be them. You know what I mean? And I always use the example where if there's somebody working within a workplace, say with someone with a disability, when they've got a question with a disability, the whole office goes and looks at that person like they got the answer, right? And then that person feels pressure to go, oh my God, and they make up the answer or they pretend like they know the answer. And it's so refreshing and it's so true to be able to go, you know what? I don't know the answer, but let's work it together to figure out the answer and have the confidence that we can do so. I think it's so important to be able to show that you don't have to know everything all the time, as long as you work as a cohesive unit to figure out the best way to move forward. You know, within an organization, it might be within your family, within the current landscape, within the community. You know, it permeates across every facet.
To all of you, do we need to just cut ourselves a bit of slack? And I'm talking to everybody watching this. Some of you may have seen it a few months ago. I saw something on social media and it was from the forestry department in Canada, of all things. And basically they had a directive and it spelled out working remotely because it was foreign to all of them. And it said, no, you're not working from home. You are doing your best to get work done at home while juggling all of your other roles and tasks, and saying to yourself, okay, I've got the answer to this. It's to get everything done and be a partner and a mother and do everything that we need to do around our family. I know the answer. I will work till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning so that I will get everything done. But that's not the answer, and that's not sustainable, is it?
Yeah, far from it. But it's also, I think the reality, and you know, Georgia talked about this before with the word productivity. There's this bizarre fetish we've got with productivity, whereby I even heard a comment the other day when someone said, you know, I'm saving my commute time so I can reinvest that in work to be more productive. I'm like, no, that commute time was yours. Use it to grow or listen to a podcast or do Pilates. Don't use it to work. Don't extend the work day. Like, those habits creep in because people are nervous about, you know, what if Joe in finance is working a bit longer and I get left behind and I get made redundant or something happens. And so the fear of not opening up, the fear of not being vulnerable, or all the fear of what could happen, the recourse, is actually prompting us to do some pretty crazy stuff right now, which is definitely not sustainable and just leads to burnout. So I think that's where that conversation needs to elevate of going, what is the stack rank? Right? I need you to survive as a human. I need you to be a great member of your family. I need you to be a great member of society, and then work. Right? And actually, we often do it the other way around. And so I was fortunate years ago to work with a great organizational professor, and he said, we don't own people as assets. They're not resources. We borrow them from their family for 8 hours a day, and our job is to return them in a better state than we took them in. And I was like, I like that reframe. Like, you're not a resource. I'm not deploying you for 8 hours a day. You're not a machine. You're a human, and that's the mindset shift that we need.
I just want to finish with a word that we touched on earlier, and clearly it's resonating with so many people now. Trust. We just have to trust now, don't we?
Yeah, I think I like George's point on trust. Like, we've got to trust ourselves first before we can expect it from others. And if you've not got that belief in there, if you don't trust yourself, it's a really hard thing to get from someone else. So I think it's like know yourself and trust. Have conviction in your own actions and role modeling, and then I think it will reciprocate. It's a first mover deal.
I mean, trust is similar to faith, right? Which is the belief in things unseen. So you only really need to have trust when you can't see something. So, but I actually feel like if we replace that word to surrender, that it's actually more of a helpful thing to be able to do, and surrender to what is, surrender to the lessons, surrender to the situation, because when we don't do that, we create drama. And that doesn't serve us, and it doesn't serve the world around us. So, that's kind of the thing that's getting me going at the moment. So you surrender to, who knows financially what things are going to look like. You surrender to, I don't know how long we're going to be in this situation, but fighting it isn't working. It isn't working for me. So I'm finding that a little bit even more helpful to play with as a word.
Well said.
Guys, it's been terrific. We could talk forever, but we will pause and we'll wrap things up in just a moment. Thank you, everyone. It's just been great of all of you to share a big part of yourselves, because we all know that it just encourages and gives other people confidence, which we've spoken about, to do the same thing. I gather you've all got something out of our chat?
Yeah, I think the recurring theme that keeps coming is, prioritizing your well-being in any way that you can, you know what I mean? Because then you can really trust what's going on. As George said, surrender, but most importantly, embrace the situation that we're in and be the best version of you in whatever that is, you know what I mean? And it's going to be an up and down ride, as it continues to be. And I mean, I just feel better talking about it. I've got to go play tennis right now. I'm going to hit tennis balls amazingly well, I reckon. I'm in a good mood, but I can't thank Dom and Georgia enough, especially, hearing people that are so successful be so vulnerable and say that they're also going through things that everybody's going through. I think it's such a powerful message, and I really appreciate, being involved in the project.
Fabulous. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Georgia. Thank you, Dom. Thank you, Dylan. It has been fantastic. And to those of you that have been watching, we trust you've enjoyed it. Thanks very much for joining us on the Wellbeing Conversation.
Hey everyone, Dylan Alcott again. Now, we touched on a few topics around mental health throughout that chat. Now, if that brought up anything for you, make sure you reach out to beyondblue.org.au, or their phone number is 1300 22 4636. You can also hit up Lifeline on 13 11 14, or reach out to the people within your ANZ teams, and they'll be able to help.